Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Redox 5, coming to you from global space all around the world. We're live somewhere, it's 5 o'clock. So, Jim Glenn and Ann Glenn in San Antonio, Texas, with their anniversary bliss all over their faces.
Happy anniversary.
22 years. Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Thank you, Lee.
Thank
We congratulate them for putting up with each other for all these years, and we're glad they're still here.
Yeah, her with me for sure.
Right. We excuse Maureen Hayes, who's at the Ascent trip, Puerto Rico. So we'll get a kind of an update next time when
next week.
she's back with us. My name is Lee Osler. I am a general dentist in the state of Washington. And tonight we have the distinct pleasure of having Dr. Aaron Kaufman from Albuquerque. He's just outside of Albuquerque, but that's New Mexico, the state of New Mexico in the United States. And so we're really glad to have him back with us again. He's been practicing since 1985. It was just when he graduated from medical school. And he's developed some unique expertise in some natural healing methods in his practice and the way he thinks. And so I think that was kind of a natural thing for him when ASEA came to him. So, Dr. Aaron, we welcome you back with us. Let's kick this off. There's obviously going to be some people who are new or who will be watching the recording of this who are new, who don't know who Aaron Kaufman is or why you're even here. Like, what is the big deal? Could you start with that and kind of bring us all up to speed with where you came from and what attracted you to ASEA Redox?
Well, I think they're right if they don't think I'm a big deal, because I don't either. But, I do love the science and the products, and I do love, helping people get healthy. So, Lee, or Dr. Osler, I went to medical school in the early 80s, and I went to an osteopathic medical school. So I learned all the foundational areas of medical science and, went through all the, different training facilities and so forth. But also, as part of our training, they taught us to use our hands to help the body heal. So I took naturally to that. I had a proclivity and a talent for it and so forth. And when I set out into practice here in Albuquerque 38 years ago, I used my hands a lot and still do. I was immediately drawn to all the alternative, possibilities even back then of ways to help the body heal. I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to have to endure my medical training, and then I want to go out and learn like about herbs and natural healing. And I didn't know what was available. And this is a long time ago. This is 40 years ago or so. And I was amazed during my training to run across people who, I guess you could call them healers, but they really had a lot of consciousness around, certainly around using their hands. I worked for some of the old timers that could just do magic, which, once you've learned it, it's no longer magic, but to the people who don't understand, it is. And I ran across a guy up in San Francisco I worked with who was into homeopathy and so forth. And so it just started coming to me. I went out into practice, and patients would bring me things. I would go to conferences, read about things. And these days, everybody I see gets nutritional recommendations and recommendations for activity, because diet and exercise is the foundation of staying healthy. And everything I do, I have a dispensary in my clinic that has over 120 different herbs and homeopathics and glandulars and enzymes and, supplements of all kinds. And nowadays it has redox signaling molecules in it. And, products that support redox biochemistry. I do more of the human identical hormones than anybody in New Mexico for 25 plus years. I lost track by now. I do a lot of regenerative injections like proliferative therapy that rebuilds ligaments and tendons, and also PRP which is also regenerative. So that's sort of my background, and I used to do early in my training, I'd do obstetrics. I got tired of being up in the middle of the night, but I'd treat from birth to the grave. And, we have a lot of things that really make a difference in people's lives. And just to kind of jump the gun a little bit, I was introduced to ASEA and redox signaling 13 years ago, and I'd never heard of it. So I started, in my initial reaction, because of, it being sold person to person direct sales, was to be averse to it because I'd had bad experiences with network marketing companies back in the 80s and 90s. And I said, I'm not going to do that anymore because there was a lot of hype and misrepresentation. And, I kind of pride myself is not the right word, but I value deeply sincerity and transparency and honesty and caring and so forth. And, I didn't resonate with that. And so when I was introduced to these products, or back then it was just the ASEA Redox, and I found out it was network marketing, I said, absolutely not. And I was serious. And I'd been 15 years, I'd been burned, and that's enough. But once, and what you were kind of alluding to earlier, Jim, what kind of broke through my barrier, and probably important for people who are talking to physicians and so forth, is not my doctor friend telling me how good it was, but her dripping on me, giving me research articles one by one over a couple of years. And interestingly, back then, so again, this is 2011. Back then, not only did I not know what redox cell signaling was, because it was a relatively new science, I didn't know what it was capable of, and almost nobody did. It was, this new arena, and we were discovering all these things that it would do, and we still are. But we had just a whole world full of experiences by now that are just mind-boggling. So the first thing I did was she gave me research articles on athleticism. And there was a researcher in the Research Triangle in North Carolina, Dr. David Neiman, PhD, exercise physiologist. And he did studies on high performance cyclists and found that when they drank these redox molecules, the ASEA, they could go 12% further before they hit their ventilatory threshold, the runner's wall, or whatever you want to call that. And it just so happens, coincidence, divine orchestration, however you choose to look at it, I live at 7,000 feet, or that's about 2,300 meters for people who use metric, above Albuquerque. And I would run out my back door through the Cibola National Forest up to 8,000 feet and back 3-4 times a week. And there were 8 places running uphill where I would be like, and I couldn't get enough air. And I love the feeling. It's, pushing my limits and so forth. But there were 8 places where I'd max myself and have to walk for a few minutes before I could catch my breath and start to run. Well, these studies that Dr. Neiman was doing with the athletes was exactly what I was doing. And he says, oh, they go 12% further. There were 2 other studies. There was a bunch of studies he did, but 2 others that really caught my attention. One was a metabolomics I must have done some sort of hand signal. I don't know what makes that happen.
Big celebration today?
Go ahead and show us the other ones because there's a couple of other ones that you do.
Okay.
He's got something set on Zoom. Watch, here we
I don't
go.
know what I did.
Fun. Must be for our anniversary.
No. He's got something set. He doesn't know what he did.
And this is for I don't know what.
Oh, okay. Oh
Watch.
my gosh.
Starts to
I saw
rain.
that last week. I was like, whoa.
I don't
That
know
is
where
too.
those came from. I didn't set it.
One last week. It was
But anyway,
Anyway.
I'm reading these articles, and it's exactly what I'm going through. And the other two articles that or research pieces that got my attention, one was called a metabolomics study, and these same athletes, they had them drink, I believe, 8 ounces of ASEA, and then 15 minutes before they started exercising, drew their blood. And they had to run the studies twice because they couldn't believe the results they were seeing. There were this huge number of intermediaries and precursors to Krebs cycle, the energy production cycle, that were dramatically increased. In other words, your ability to produce and utilize energy. And that it was a well done study, independent, but it really got my attention. And the last one that really got my attention is these mice that were drinking the ASEA would go 29% further before they were exhausted, whatever it was, fell off the wheel or whatever. And no placebo with mice. You can't get them to run 29% further for no reason. So all of that kind of percolated. She would give me an article, then a month or so later, give me another article. And finally, I started drinking it improperly. I would just drink it on the days I would run. And I was starting to power up the mountain harder and faster. And yeah, there's another one. I don't know. I'm going to have to figure out how to reset these. But, I started powering up the mountain harder and faster. And then, I had to get more. And she asked me how I was drinking it. And I told her, and she says, well, you're supposed to drink it every day. And, okay. And so I did. And within 3 months of starting to drink it, a month before I turned 60, I set new personal best times for those trails that at that time I'd been running 16 years by 20%. And so that got my attention. In all 8 of those places where I'd maxed myself, I was going 20 to 50 yards further up the mountain. And instead of taking several minutes to be able to catch my breath when I maxed, it was about a minute. So,
Hey, Aaron,
go ahead.
hey, how much were you drinking then? Just what the label said, or were you doing any more than that?
That, pretty much all we knew was 4 ounces. So 2 of the little shot cups a day.
Would you do it right before you ran, or would you do it? Did you remember any of that?
I don't remember, Jim.
Okay.
well, since you did it on running days, figured before.
Initially I was, but I don't know once I started drinking properly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. At any rate, so I set new personal best times a month before I turned 60. 4 months in, I remember my shoulder stopped hurting. And that was about when I was at this conference over in Phoenix on prolotherapy and injections. And I remember I had gone through a 2-year bout of fatigue like 25 years ago, and had figured out how to recover. It was part of the protocols I have for fatigue now. And if I would eat something sweet, desserts or whatever, I'd be awake half the night. I couldn't stay asleep. And I remember they had these lovely desserts, and I went, oh, well, what the heck? And then I slept, and I went, holy mackerel. And I started sleeping like I hadn't slept before that in probably 15 plus years. And then one thing after another stopped hurting over a year, which is important to recognize. Anybody who's been using this a while can tell you that you keep noticing improvements. As the way to think about these is they youthen, they turn on cellular efficiency. As you start using these and youthening your cells, making them work better, one thing after another that it's taken me 70 years to damage starts repairing itself, starts working better. So you notice improvements for years. So, when somebody starts drinking it or using the gel and they go, oh, well, I didn't notice much, or, 2 months in, 3 months in, it's like, yes, it's not worth it. It's like, stay tuned. You will notice more.
We've always told people too, Dr. Kaufman, that if you've been doing it correctly, for 3 months, then stop. Just stop cold turkey.
Yeah,
and you'll, oh crud, it's really working, because they feel lethargic, body aches and discomforts come back, and they just don't feel as good as what they did, even just within a couple of days. That's just kind of really rather remarkable. Hey, Lee, why don't you go ahead and do the disclaimer and kind of go into that real quick, and why we have to do that?
Yes, we're each sitting here, as well as many who are on the call watching, as associates of a company named ASEA Global. And we represent this company and some of its supplement products because of the experiences that we or our friends or our loved ones have had with them, as well as because we've studied the science and understand really, the foundation operation of the cells and what's going on. But because it's a supplement, we don't make claims to treat, diagnose, cure diseases. We don't discuss them specifically. This is a cellular health company, a cellular health product that helps the cells to work better, to function. We call it signaling. We'll get into that perhaps here in a little bit and maybe define what that means. But because of that signaling or that improved cellular functionality, then all sorts of things can be signaled or be spoken into being via the genetic code. We call them pathway genes that activate what we could I guess we could just group them and call them longevity and survival genes, as a grouping. It's things that make you better, that make you get heal quicker, that make you more comfortable, and on and on. So I'd like to go back and touch on something, Aaron, that you used the word youthen. I really like that. I've used that a few times myself, but I've heard you speak of that. As I look at this and I study the anti-aging movement, if you will, and I don't mean so much the practitioner side of anti-aging, because I don't really think it's gotten kicked into gear yet, but the science side, unbeknownst to probably 99% of the people, the science side of anti-aging research is now starting to move forward, very significantly, and they're just now beginning to do human trials. We've been using worms and nematodes and fruit flies, and now they're starting to move this research into humans. So maybe you could, jump off that a little bit and maybe just expand on what youthen means. And we're not talking about euthanizing. We're talking about euthanine, becoming younger or functioning like we used to when we were younger, but come at it from like anti-aging. It's like, why would the science support this? And maybe you could even start that discussion by telling us what the science is.
Sure. Can I finish the disclaimer?
Please.
So the disclaimer is these products are considered cosmetics and supplements by the FDA in the United States and most other countries, the equivalent organizations. So we cannot make medical claims. Drugs treat or cure or diagnose illnesses and diseases. We are not designed to treat or cure or diagnose any disease or illness. But I think what you're starting to hear and what we're going to talk more about now and throughout the rest of this session is that these turn on our cells. And again, what is youthen means makes our cells work more like when we were children, when we were younger, more efficiently, more effective to do their job. And therefore, you think about when you were a little kid and how you responded to the slings and arrows of life, the injuries and the diseases and so forth. And our bodies were a lot more able to, deal with those stresses. Just getting down into the science a little bit, like Dr. Osler asked, it's interesting. I'll back up a little bit. We are 73% seawater, salt water. So every reaction within our cells, including in the little energy factories called the mitochondria that are in each cell, all these reactions take place in this medium of salt water. And just interestingly, again, in the mitochondria, we're constantly running this thing called the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle, and we're producing energy, ATP, and these molecules spin off that are positively and negatively charged, and they're called reductants and oxidants. And the contraction of that name is redox. And those, again, back the story I told when I was first looking at this, I'd never heard of it because it was a relatively new science. When I was in medical school, literally 40 years ago, and we were studying this energy production, there was no such term as redox cell signaling because we thought those negative and positive ions or molecules that spun off were waste products. It was 1998, these three Italian researchers, PhDs, won the Nobel Prize for showing no, they were not waste products. They literally are foundational to life. So people listening, don't hear me speak. You don't think a thought, you don't grow hair, digest food. You don't take a breath. Your heart doesn't beat. It's not turned on and turned off, signaled by these redox signaling molecules that are in ASEA. So to, this refinement, Dr. Osler, of youthening, of anti-aging and so forth, all these years, there's been one thing after another, looking at antioxidants and things that, make your skin look younger and so forth and so on, but none of it youthened our cells. It was mostly supplements and injections and and it was a huge boost after Dr. John R. Lee, who is the father of the use of human identical hormones in the early 90s when we started using human hormones. That was a huge step. But there's nothing that directly addresses that, like these redox cell signaling molecules. And ASEA Global up in Pleasant Grove, Utah, where they produce these, is the only company in the world at 13 years in business has been able to figure out how to produce these identical redox cell signaling molecules that all of us are producing right now in the same ratios, but interestingly, fascinatingly, miraculously, in a stabilized form. Inside our cells, we produce them with enzymes in nanoseconds, and they're utilized in million microseconds. So they're literally here and gone before you can blink. And again, foundational, you don't hear me think, you don't hear me speak, blah, 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 blah. But they're here and gone before you can blink. These are stable in an unopened bottle for, I think it used to be 15 or 18 months, but they keep, refining it and extending it. So now it's up to like 2 years. They're still potent. And these are the most bioactive molecules in the human body in existence. And we've got them so we can replenish them. And the things that all of us are seeing, these mind-boggling things that my statement is that you just don't see anywhere else. Mainstream medicine, alternative, integrative, anti-aging medicine, the things we see with these and the topical redox gel are just mind-boggling. So, that's a long answer, but we got a lot of time. So I hope that answered your question, Lee.
Great explanation.
You're muted, Lee.
Yeah, it did. Thank you. And perhaps we could morph that into the conversation of what resilience means. It's like we're turning on genes, we're activating DNA, pathways that produce responses that stabilize, conditions in the body that are under stress and so forth. But why does that matter? What is resilience? How would you describe that? Like for example, you're healthy. Let's say you're healthy right now. Someone young might say, "Well, I don't need that. I'm young, and I've got everything with me." But how would you speak with them with regards to the idea of resilience?
A simple little question. Well, a couple of years ago, I read a couple of really, really good books. One was called Redox Matters, and the other one was called Health Matters. And you got them behind you there, right? Dr.
I do.
Osler wrote these books. And then 2 years ago, about now, we were over in Las Vegas, and ASEA's Medical Professionals Board was doing an afternoon of presentations. And Dr. Osler and I both on ASEA's Medical Professionals Board. And I had some of the preliminary transcripts and so forth of the first book, Redox Matters. And Dr. Osler was kind enough to supply me with material, and I educated myself. And I gave this deep, deep dive science that was really information dense. And I think it basically went totally over most people's head. But it was about this resilience. It was about cellular metabolism, redox balance, and cellular regeneration. And without boring you to tears, we went deep dive into what makes cells balance out. And we live in a toxic world, very toxic world, food and air and stress. And we could go on and on, about the things that are stressing us, on a cellular level. And, a big part of life is oxidative stress, and that creates, again, this balance in the cells. When there starts to be a healthy level of oxidative stress, all these redox mechanisms that these molecules trigger come into balance. And we make things like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase, which are antioxidant and create this balance that allows our cells to do what they do. Recognize damage, repair it, recognize abnormal cells, kill them off. Whatever the stress is, it allows us to balance that out. And, it's real common in the world today that those systems get overwhelmed because there's just so much coming at us on so many levels. And so to be able to supplement, there's a lot of things we can do, from intermittent fasting to heavy duty exercise, getting enough sleep, eating, cutting out our sugar and starch, and, so forth and so on. But this, short circuits, it's not like you don't need to take care of those basics. But this, when you replace your redox molecules, those cells that are overly stressed can come into balance much easier and quicker. That was a long answer. Did that touch on what you wanted to say? Why don't you give me your version of it?
But here's
That's
the
great.
simple.
What's that?
Here's a simple idea, and that is, you think about today I'm fine. I don't have an illness. The latest, whatever it is that's running around from my neighbors. I haven't caught it yet. Whatever, right? And so we could get lost in the argument of, well, I don't need anything because I'm okay, right? Or even in my ignorance, I could say, well, I eat a balanced diet, or whatever that might mean to somebody, right? But there's a metaphor here that I have found very fitting, and that is when there's a hurricane, when there's a tornado, whatever, a fierce storm, the trees with the deep roots are the ones that survive.
Yeah.
And so I think the metaphor can be, very well applied to humans. It's obviously, it could be applied to animals, any organism that, that has cells and runs on these same, biochemistry pathways. But, the question is, why does one person get ill and another person not when exposed to the same stress or agent or, whatever? And I just like that metaphor. It's a fitting one because in almost a parable kind of way, you can take this in multiple directions. If I focus on running my roots deep, I want to be getting the water and the nutrients from the soil, and taking in the life-sustaining sunshine, in this plant organism. And if I do that, then I can resist the storm when it comes, because the storm isn't there every day. Even though we do have stresses every day, the kind of things that take us out in significant ways, we need to be prepared for. We need to have resilience, capability, adaptability, capacity. And it's when we don't, that when something big or small comes along, we have our knees cut out from underneath us because we can't stand up to whatever the stress is. So that's one thought. The other is just all of the stresses in our life can be cumulative, and they just wear us down. And again, that's a resilience thing. And so the goal is resilience. That people say, well, when I take vitamin C, well, do you feel it? Do you know when can you feel the difference of when you don't take vitamin C, for example? So then why would I take vitamin C? It's for this same reason. I want resilience. I want to improve my capacity to resist the stresses. So maybe that's a high level way, but I think people can relate to that.
Can you guys kind of deal real quick, Aaron?
Let me comment real quick on what he said. I really love that analogy, and it just hit me while you're describing it. Another way to use that same analogy is, if you're constantly out in the hurricane, you're getting battered and so forth. But when you take care of your cellular balance, ASEA redox, the exercise, the sleep, and that sort of thing, you move into the eye of the hurricane, and it keeps going around, but you don't get battered. Anyway, thanks for that analogy. I like that.
The point is, you don't go to the gym,
Right.
You don't go to the gym and get stronger by using less weight every time you go. You don't become aerobically fit by running or walking slower each time you go. You have to put a little bit of stress. You have to induce something on purpose, and it needs to be intermittent. You talked about intermittent fasting. So why does fasting have a health benefit, for example? Especially if I do it intermittently. We're not going to fast every day of the week all month, But the point is that when I purposefully, strategically, on purpose, do something that stresses my system, stresses my cells, even ever so slightly. The science world calls that hormesis. It's just a slight, mild oxidative stress. That's what creates resilience, because now I have the capacity. It's not about being in balance. You really don't want a goal of always being in balance. What you want is the goal of being able to return efficiently to balance when you intermittently stress yourself through lifestyle, or now we have a C redox signaling molecules that do the same thing. So, and that was the David Neiman study that you pointed out to me. That when I read that, that's what clicked in my mind. It's like, we now have a study that shows that we can purposely, strategically, and in a mimetic way, we can mimic, right? By using this solution, we can mimic stress, and it does produce shifts or changes in the metabolomics of Krebs cycle, meaning the energy molecules that my cells are choosing to burn for energy.
Right.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Talking about the storm analogy, storms always pass as well. We're all going to go through difficult times, but people always ask the question, but I have this or that issue. Will it help me with this or that? Okay, I put the answer in because I heard this was answered this way years and years ago. And Aaron, you may have, I'm sure, met, Dr. Samuelson. Are there any cells involved? Then this will work. But people just don't realize what we're talking about, that it takes a long time. You said it, Aaron, that, 70 years old, I'm 66, and it takes time for these things to build up, for the damage to have been done. then the symptoms is kind of like that, the iceberg above, it pokes its head above the surface of the water, and there's so much damage potential below, but we're just, I don't know what's wrong with people. Are we just in a stupor? Are we just, no, I don't want to hear, think, see. I'm just going to keep my head buried. And oh, but when my stuff comes up, I term them until people. Well, then I want your help. Is that just the ongoing issue with the human beings, that we're just going to always be that way? But what's going on, though, guys, is that a lot of doctors are getting out of practice. I mean, we talked to Dr. Michael, a couple of weeks ago, and he took one shingle down, put up another shingle. Now he's only private pay. But a lot of doctors are kind of they're tired of the system. And it's probably, you were very brilliant early on in your career going to the path that you did. But a lot of people are scared today, and I think we're having an awakening where people are finally starting to wake up and go, I think I better start taking better care of myself. Is it ever too late for anybody to start taking care of themselves?
It's a big question, touches on a lot of stuff, Jim. What I find myself saying to patients a lot in the past year or two is, we do a really, really good job of helping you delay the inevitable.
Right.
We're not going to live forever, but, based on what we're talking about here, the cellular resilience and euthaning and so forth, we can maybe, now the studies are coming out with the C. elegans worms that probably we will live longer, probably, no accounting for an individual, but, as a people. And certainly what we see all the time, just, amazingly, is, dealing with the issues, the slings and arrows again, helping to overcome all these, illnesses and so forth. So, getting into, I'm not gonna delve into why people, don't listen and don't wait until the last minute and so forth. But, we can look at anything we want and blame media and so forth, and big pharma and the food industry, which are hand in glove with each other. The food makes us sick and the drugs keep us, so forth and so on. And they control, they're huge, and they control thought, and they control governments and so forth. So it's, when people go to the grocery store, they shop the middle of the store instead of the healthy stuff on the outside, and it makes us sick. And the advertising supports it, and the way they produce it makes you crave it. It has things called excitogens that if you don't eat it, you crave it and so forth. So it takes a little bit of education, and, again, media is bought and paid for. And, as I start to talk about this, it just gets so unwieldy. Now we have, personal communications through the internet and so forth, and, people in chats and so forth. They are learning about these alternatives, things like this, and, cellular balance, and on and on and on, all these ways to youthen. And there's a lot of distortion there. It's not pure. So, but at least they're starting to look, and people are seeking this out. And it's sort of always been thus. It's just the volume on all the negative stuff and so forth is cranked up just dramatically since we were younger, since I started in practice 38 years ago. There's always been an interest, and there still is, and there's people taking it to extremes. I'm not sure what to tell you, except, thank God for this stuff.
Exactly. Well, I was just going to say, both of you guys, what you shared, the analogy, that's being proactive. That's arming your body for what could come. I mean, if you follow, what's happened to your own parents and your lineage and your genes, I mean, you're kind of can get yourself ready for what would happen if you live your lifestyle, sabotaging your redox potential. But I mean, you go to the gym for more than just, for some people, keeping weight off. There is more benefits to exercise than just that. The flexibility, the bone density, the strength, vitality. I mean, we just have to teach people to keep moving. But most people go that easy route and they don't take it serious until something unfortunately gets diagnosed, or they see the writing on the wall and they're like, oh shoot, now I better do something. So we're all about educating and getting people to where they need to see the reason they need to get on these. But I was going to ask you, Aaron, so you get somebody comes in your office with ABC going on, how do you segue to talking about the redox signaling molecules, the Renew 28, possibly, or other products, when you have, which I've studied for years, the herbs, the nutrition we didn't have till a number of years ago, and we have some of the best. How do you talk to somebody about, well, maybe you should consider redox signaling molecules? How do you segue from, because they could just say, well, I'll just do a bunch of herbs. Well, they could be allergic to ABC herb. So share how you share this with Sally. She just walked in the office and she's got all this stuff going on. How do you start that conversation?
Well, it's funny. I remember the first few patients I ever told about this. Again, I was so averse to using it, but then I just start seeing these amazing results. And I said to Dr. Edmonds, who shared it with me, I go, I'm running like an animal, and I'm sleeping, and I don't hurt. I'm gonna have to drink this stuff. I was upset. I said, I'm
Ever.
gonna drink this for the rest of my life, and it's not cheap. And she goes, well, if you tell 6 people, yours gets paid for. And I go, oh, and I remember sitting in a room and again, realize I've got this experience from the past with network marketing that is hype and misrepresentation. You start talking to people about it, whatever the products are, and they start backing up, or at least emotionally. And I remember going, okay, well, this person has this, that, and the other. Maybe it would help them. And the first time I told somebody about it, I remember rolling my eyes and going, there's this stuff, very professional. I've been drinking this stuff called ASEA. And I remember the first year or so, because of what was going on then, people would look up and to the right, and I would go, no, it's not the acai berry. And they would, oh, okay. And I would say, I'm running like an animal. Is that a new person? There I go.
Oh, there it goes. Running like an ant.
Right. And I'm sleeping like I hadn't slept in 15, 20 years. And I'm, one thing after another keeps hurting. And they were leaning in. And, like when you read a story to a little kid, the eyes were getting. And I remember 2 of the first people that I talked to about it said, they raised their hand and said, I want that. And the first one I said, you do? Because it was such a shock. These days, and it's just, I use so much of it. I've seen so much. Most days I hear some kind of story about something that's better in somebody's life, or that they didn't die, that kind of stuff. And, wounds healing quicker and all kinds of stuff. And so it's become part of my armamentarium, if you will, something in my utility belt. And I commonly will talk to somebody about, okay, you've got ABC, Sally. And so, here's the spectrum of things that we can, look at. And I commonly will say, if it was me, I would be whatever, taking vitamin C and drinking ASEA and, redox signaling molecules and using human hormones, or, quercetin, or, whatever it is. And then I say, some other things that might be intermediate, like over-the-counter medications, like things that you can get, like Benadryl or whatever it is. And then I'll say, here's the prescriptions, and these are kind of hard on the body, and I wouldn't recommend these. These are pretty effective. So I kind of lay a smorgasbord out there and say, here's the way to do it naturally. And here's other things you can do, but these things are not going to fix the problem. And things like this and the things over here probably are. And it's interesting, over 38 years, I attract a lot of people who are into that, who are into natural ways of healing and youthening and anti-aging and so forth. But I still get a lot of people who are just used to give me a prescription, fix my problem. And so I educate them and say, we can do that. But it's less and less that people aren't willing to look at that. Is
Yeah.
that your question?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Could you expand on that last thought just a little bit, the drug mindset? Because that goes
Yeah.
back to something Jim always talks about. It's like, people go, well, I didn't feel anything, and so they're expecting to take this, whatever it is, the pill, tablet, intervention, and then they bring that same evaluative mindset to this, not understanding what cellular health is about. Could you expand that just a moment?
Sure. And I'd love to hear your 2 cents on it too. But, I think we've trained people, it's Western medicine. Oh, my gosh, all these soapboxes that I don't like to get up on, but,
Sometimes we have to, Doc.
yeah, in and out in 7 minutes, and then next patient, and okay, you've got this, that, and the other going on, and this reductionistic viewpoint of, treating patients that says, oh, you've got this, so here's the drug A plus B equals C or whatever, and here's your prescription, next patient. And, people come to me all day long, every day for 38 years, who've been to urgent care and ER and other doctors and 23 doctors in the Mayo Clinic, and it's like they're still sick. And
That's crazy.
I do some basic stuff. I listen to people and ask a whole bunch of questions, very pointed. And we were taught in medical school, I think something like 85% of your diagnosis should come from your history. Another 5 to 10% comes from the physical examination, and only about 5% should come from verification by tests. Well, we flip that now because of, again, I'm not going to get into this part of the soapbox, the finances and the money and, oh my gosh. Anyway, and so people, say, oh, you've got this, let's send you to this specialist. Here's the drug, next patient. And people just get sicker and sicker. So, and they don't ask questions. And the litigious atmosphere in this country, at least in America, it's like, if I don't run all these tests and you sue me, then, defensive medicine. And it's just, healthcare has turned to crap, and I see it all day, every day. So, just asking those questions and listening to the answers and targeting and homing in, I know what's going on usually. And then we can offer them this. I lost the gist of the question. Did I answer it or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Lee, you're going to touch on it as well.
Yeah. You wanted his 2 cents.
I
Yeah.
do too. You're muted. Okay, there you go.
It is an interesting conundrum because it speaks to people's paradigm, and even after you explain it, then they'll come back and say, well, will it work for X or will it work for Y? They're still looking for the drug that will fix something without understanding the cellular basis. And again, this isn't really a metaphor or an analogy, but the point is, you didn't develop whatever sickness you're talking about, in a weekend. Generally, I'm talking about chronic degenerative disorders, that are lifelong. Some of them have a genetic base to it, or a trigger point. But the point is, we still, and I think we need to make this statement too. It's like, we're not here trashing regular healthcare. There is a place for it in our system. You don't take herbs right away if your bone is at 90 degrees because you just broke your leg. It's like
Yeah.
you're going to use regular healthcare modalities and medications while you get this fixed up. But the chronic degenerative stuff, it took years to get to the point where your cells aren't working enough, that things go bad with your blood vessels and brain cells and on and on. And so you can't just say, well, I tried this for a week or a month and it didn't work. Like whatever that word really means. What do you mean it didn't work? I contend that it works the second it's on board. These
It
are
has to, right?
energetic molecules that cascade through the body, and they flip or alter what we call redox switches. These are transcription factors that are responsible for turning on pathway genes that begin the healthy cellular response. And when the cells are now responding in a healthy way, they combat, they defend, they restore, they rejuvenate, they repair DNA, they protect telomeres. I mean, they do all of these things. And if you're not doing these things, redox lifestyle oriented, then none of those things are really going to happen well.
All of this just seems the proverbial too good to be true. But everything we're talking about is true. And when people can say 90% get results in 90 days, and then the 10% that said it didn't work, I say stop taking it and you'll know in a matter of days. But Dr. Kaufman, do you ever use, and Lee as well, what is crazy is this gel that if you go get a tube of gel and apply to, Dr. Silverman talks about this all the time with 10 people.
Yep.
And Jerry White has done this in places where he approached close to 60 people in a span of 2 days and did the gel, apply it to your boo-boo or apply it to any part of your body. And with almost without fail, people get an immediate response. Do you experience that in your practice? And Lee, do you do that as well in yours? Where you can validate that I don't know what I tell them, I don't know what it's doing. That's a God question. You got to take it up with him. These are his molecules. And when he did it, it works. But that's a conundrum because it's like, nothing works that quick, guys. But this does. And that's how we can validate that it works. I don't know what it's doing. All I care, it works.
Well, when cells are involved, oh, is he muted?
Yeah, I didn't know, Aaron, do you do that with people that come in with discomfort? And I know you've had some other people that have had some phenomenal testimonials that live around you, but we've got like 7 minutes left. I mean, people can validate this real quick if they just get over themselves and just give it a shot. What the heck is it going to hurt?
I use, there's a guy in North Carolina, Chuck Tyndall, friend of Terry Latham's, came up with Tyndall Swipe, which I use a lot. And it's fun. I call it a parlor trick, and we actually
But it works.
we do know why it works. And these are these molecules in here are 2 and 3 and 4 atoms in size. They are tiny, tiny, tiny. When you drink it, when you put it on your skin, boom, they're inside your body. And what Lee was talking about just a couple of minutes ago, they start these cascades, they trigger these repair and recognize and so forth, all these regenerative pathways inside these cells, and it triggers a cascade through whole systems. So when I do the Tyndall Swipe, which I love doing, you get amazing responses. We put a dab on your fingers. And first of all, you have them evaluate whatever's going on. And this has grown over the years. We typically have started with discomfort. We're not supposed to say pain, but discomfort. And I remember this rep from this company one time was having lunch in our clinic, and we started talking about these molecules. And he said, and I asked him, and he's a big, tall guy, and he said his low back hurt and his left big toe hurt. And I had him rate him on a scale of 10. You can also have people say, yeah, my shoulder only goes to here, or this is
Right.
stiff. And I've extrapolated this to people with tremors and people with head discomfort, sinus head discomfort. And I think there's some others, but anyway, I have them rate them on a scale of 10. They put a dab of this on and rub it right over the carotids right here. Do another dab and a third dab. And real commonly, I will ask right away. I've done this in groups at presentations and so forth, and go around with the microphone. Real commonly, people go, it's much reduced. I remember a friend of mine was in, it damaged his shoulder, and it was, I think, 7 on a scale of 10. And I had him do the Tyndall swipe. And I said, what does it feel like now? And this is like as soon as he gets it rubbed on, even before he's just rubbed it in because it's all wet. And he looks at me in the eye and he goes, that's stupid, because it was gone, People can't believe it. It's a great tool. I love the little sample tubes for doing that. But occasionally, it'll be, oh, well, it's down from a 7 to a 4. And then you ask
Right.
them 5 or 10 minutes later, like David Silverman does, and then it's down to 0 and so forth. Oh, I know. The one I forgot was this lady. I was doing a presentation and I had her, she was new, and she said she had sinus issues and her face was 7 on the scale of 10, but she was really anxious.
Oh,
And I had her rate that, and she did the Tyndall swipe 3 times. And I said, what is it now? And she goes, it's the same. And I talked a little bit more. And then I said, what about now? It's like a minute or 2 later. And she says, still there. And I went back into the presentation, and about 10 minutes in, her eyes get real big and she interrupts me and she says, they're gone and my anxiety's gone. So, it is pretty miraculous, and it's fun. I call it Redox parlor tricks.
and you
Yeah.
can't deny that it works when you do a test like that. I did want a quick comment. You have a short little video that says, "Will it work on eyes?" And people don't realize that when cells are involved, and we're not making claims, but give it long enough use and take enough, and who knows, those eyes could just start to improve. The other comment you made was, well, it's expensive, but it's cheaper. I'm thinking about Jim and all the years of discomfort and missing out on so many things in life, and the long-term medication use way before we were married. It's cheaper to be on this, being proactive, than it was to pay what all he paid over the years,
Yeah.
not being on it.
Hey, Lee, real quick, can you go ahead and cover in 2 minutes why this isn't a drug? I mean, it was going to be a drug a long time ago. And so some people may be really scratching their head. If this is good as you guys say it is, then why isn't it a drug and why doesn't everybody know about it? You got 2 minutes.
The biotech
No
company,
pressure.
the biotech company that was originally doing the research, this was before ASEA Global came to be, was on a drug track that they were approaching the FDA, seeking FDA approval to be a new drug. There's obviously some hoops you have to jump through and some things you have to establish, and they were less than successful in doing that, related to establishing what's called an LD50, a lethal dose 50, where they increase the concentration of the agent until 50% of the lab animals, the mice, will perish. And then they've got data, and then they can go ahead with their drug development. Well, that wasn't happening. And so bottom line, the financial backers weren't crazy about that, backed out and kind of left it high and dry. The research firm was bleeding. Virtus Norton was there, fortunately, and was a part of the board, trying to stabilize them financially. And he saw they were going under, made an offer, took over the intellectual property, and switched this to the supplement side of the FDA. Hence, we can't make medical claims. That's where the source of our disclaimer comes from. And so from a distribution point of view, it's like, well, then how do we get this out? If it's not going to be physician supervised, if it's not going to be, in hospitals or clinics in its use, how do we get this out? And so that was where they chose this method, because they didn't want to spend more time trying to get this in, to the marketplace in other ways, or to go back to the drawing board to become a drug. It has still been working on it probably. And so blessed, I think we're blessed to be able to have this. It's in 33 countries. It is an over-the-counter product. It's a cellular health company. And I think we're sitting here as evidence, for that decision, because none of us would be sitting here if this had gone the drug route.
Well, thank you, Dr. Osler.
Good explanation.
So guys, we want to thank you, Dr. Aaron. Thank you a ton, as always. Peace out. Next week, Dr. Osler and Maureen Hayes and Dr. Dick Walker will be discussing in more depth the Dr. Naidu study that was released, not an ASEA study, and also digging into the glutathione done by the University of Bath and also Western Sydney University, which I was hoping to touch on a little bit of that. So they will be discussing that in very deep detail. Ann and I will be driving up to see our daughter up in Lubbock, so we will not be on the show for Mother's Day weekend. And so, no, we will not have Dr. Naidu. He is not on the show. He is not part of ASEA. And this is what we're trying to make abundantly clear. And so Dr. Lee and actually Dr. Kaufman and again Maureen and Dr. Walker are all on the professional board, medical board for ASEA. So those issues will be dealt with next Friday. So please join us next Friday. So with that, there you go. There you go. All the fireworks. So guys, thank you. The recording will be up in a matter of within the hour at redoxmatters.com. Again, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for hosting that and keeping that going for us all.
We're loaded on United since it's no longer
and we will
live
make
Zoom.
the recording available because we can no longer do that. Facebook made some changes. They will not allow third parties to go live on their platform, but we will post this as soon as it's available from Dr. Osler at Redox. At ASEAUnited.com.
Right,
so thank you very much. God bless. And again, Dr. Aaron, thank you. Dr. Lee, thank you. And again, Maureen will be back with us next week. Thank you, guys.
Y'all have a great weekend.
God bless.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hasta luego.